When I bought a new house, out of the blue, a truckload of stuff arrived. Bob said loudly, "From today, you're supporting my parents. If you have a problem with it, we're gonna divorce." And he snorted proudly. Finally, I can really divorce him. I won't have to suffer anymore. Thinking that, tears unexpectedly welled up in my eyes. Seeing me cry, Bob looked puzzled and leaned in, examining my face. It was always Bob who acted without considering others. So, I should be allowed to speak my mind. All right then, I'll proceed with the divorce paperwork. You're lying. I placed the business card of the divorce attorney I had on hand on the table. Bob looked shocked, his eyes darting around as if he didn't know what to say. I can't put up with Bob's selfishness. He never listens and never reflects on his actions. I don't want to be with someone like that. Seeing that Bob wasn't accepting the idea of divorce, I decided to tell him something. Hearing that name, Bob looked terrified. When I spoke to that person and explained the situation, Bob just kept making excuses. My name is Katherine Johnson, a 32-year-old woman. I work as an office employee. On the other hand, my husband, Bob Johnson, works in elderly care on a shift basis. I work regular hours, but Bob switches between day and night shifts. We met back in high school when Bob transferred to my school. He was a hard worker in middle school, participating in extracurricular activities and was part of the main team since freshman year. The high school I attended was known for its strong focus on clubs and teams. They always secured the top 3 positions in any competition. Not only in clubs, but the school also had students who excelled academically. I wasn't sure if it was the natural environment or if the teachers made it that way, but it was a great setup for someone like me who wanted to go to college. Then, one day, a transfer student came to our classroom. The room was buzzing with excitement about whether the transfer student was a boy or girl, and during the morning assembly, the student was introduced. Following the teacher's instruction, the transfer student introduced himself. "I'm Bob Johnson. Nice to meet you all." "All right, everyone, be nice to him. Bob, take that empty seat at the back." "Yes, got it." Bob walked over and took the seat next to mine. Later, the teacher assigned me to show Bob around the school. From that day, Bob and I started talking a lot. He was quiet and I, hating silence, would always start conversations. Seeing this, our classmates would sometimes ask if we were dating. One day, out of the blue, Bob casually said, "Yeah, we're dating. Didn't you know?" Which caught me by surprise. From there, we naturally started our relationship. We went out for dinners, movies, and had a lot of fun together. I was happy. After high school, I chose to work instead of going to college. Bob was insistent that we live together. Given our long relationship since high school, moving in together and eventually getting married was smooth. Then one day, Bob started working in elderly care. He said it was because his mother had worked in the same field. Although he avoided working in the same facility as his mom, they seemed to have a close relationship where he'd often seek advice about his job. Lately, he's been saying that he's having issues with his father. I asked him to tell me more, but Bob never really shared the details. I confided in my childhood friend, Mike, about all these issues. Of course, I didn't meet him personally, but decided to visit the mental clinic where he works as a counselor. Mike still had that same smile he had back in high school. He gives off that classic good guy vibe. Now, he's a certified psychologist and works as a counselor. From my perspective, Mike is truly remarkable. "Mike, you're amazing. So, you're a counselor, right? You listen to people's problems because you have it all figured out?" "No, I just want to help people." "Katherine, are things not going well with Bob?" "Yeah, there seems to be something going on with Bob's parents. He keeps things from me and won't tell me anything." Hearing this, Mike hummed thoughtfully. Seeing him concerned, I continued talking about Bob. Back in our 20s, right after we got married, our house felt so cold, unlike a newlywed's home. When I returned home, Bob never greeted me with a welcome back. We ate meals separately and just adjusted our sleep schedules for work. I never thought our marriage would become so cold. So, I prioritized my happiness over enduring this life. But Bob refused. He raised his voice and looked down on me, saying, "You won't leave me. You loved me when we started dating, didn't you?" "Yeah, but isn't it strange for a couple to not talk? I think other couples communicate more." "Oh really? So, you're comparing me to other guys? Should I take that as you cheating?" "Wait, what? What are you talking about?" His confusing words truly baffled me. We were just discussing our relationship. Why is he bringing up cheating just because I mentioned how other couples behave? It's a big misunderstanding. This isn't about cheating. The real issue is I don't understand what Bob is thinking. Wouldn't it be easier for both of us if we just divorced? I explained all this to Mike. Isn't it pretty serious if you want to divorce but can't? But Mike just nodded, listening without judging, and started typing on his computer. "Everything you've told me is securely stored, Catherine. I'll contact you once I figure out a solution." Honestly, after hearing all this, I think divorce might be the best option, Mike said as he gently closed his laptop and put it into his briefcase. He inputs the data on the computer to ensure maximum privacy. Mike agreed to help me find a solution. I felt deeply grateful. Having someone by your side feels so comforting. "See you next appointment then." "Thanks, Mike." "You're welcome." I left and headed home. Honestly, I dreaded going back. Even if I got medicine from the clinic, it wouldn't solve the root of the problem. I felt so down. When I arrived, Bob was standing at the entrance, looking furious. I had told him I was going to the clinic, and I returned within the time he had specified. What on earth? Just as I wondered this, Bob began to shout at me. "Come back from the doctor's quicker! Make my meal right now!" Suddenly, he was demanding lunch. How old does he think he is? It might be acceptable for a small child, but we're well into our 30s. Doesn't he feel embarrassed acting this way as an adult? Despite my thoughts, I knew making a fuss would lead to more trouble, so I lightly replied, all right, and let it go. But this was just the beginning of the challenge. Even if I made the meal, he'd complain about the slightest thing, like seasoning. You might think he should just cook for himself, but whenever Bob feels lonely, he becomes unreasonable. This had been his way since we started dating, so I didn't take it too seriously. Looking back, maybe if I'd patiently talked with him, I could have corrected his selfish nature. Lost in thought, I stepped inside the house and placed my shoes in the shoe rack. As I was about to start cooking after putting on an apron, Bob had another demand. "I want fried rice. Make it quick, within 5 minutes." "I can't make it that fast. Just calm down and wait a bit." "You have a problem with me? Say what you want to say. You know what'll happen, right?" His words silenced me. This pressure from him was nothing new. Since moving into this house, everything felt chaotic. Bob's dominant behavior had scared me deeply. Even though my parents believed we were a happy couple, I had been suffering daily. I had no idea what his parents thought since I hadn't met them, but living with Bob was pure agony. I contemplated voicing at least one complaint against him. While considering this, I finished making the fried rice for both of us. Bob ate without a word of thanks and then left the house. Surprisingly, he didn't return, and the house became peaceful. But the fact remained that Bob was still my husband. If I couldn't get a divorce, I decided to go back to my parents' house. What followed was a deeply unsettling event for me. I truly hoped never to feel that way again. But what was he thinking? Reflecting on it, he seemed purely selfish. Upon reaching my parents' house, they allowed me to stay after I explained why I couldn't divorce Bob. Days passed as I thought of ways to possibly divorce him. The definitive terrible event happened about 6 months after separating from Bob. I received a call on my cell phone. The caller was Bob. Why would he contact me all of a sudden? Did something happen? After all, we're still technically a couple, so it's natural to worry. With that in mind, I answered Bob's call. "Hello, It's Catherine. What do you want? Hey Catherine, long time no talk. I heard you bought a new house. Mind if I come check it out? Hearing Bob's cheerful voice after so long took me by surprise. I must be imagining things. It's probably just because I knew the old Bob that I felt this way. I took a deep breath and replied. How did you find out about the new house? I never told you anything. Oh, I heard it from your dad. He said you built a huge house. Your dad's so nice. What? I never heard anything about this. To begin with, my family's house was quite old, built in the early 20th century, and had been regularly repaired. But due to financial constraints, my parents agreed with my suggestion to build a new house. And so, while setting a budget, I started preparations to build the new house. However, it's the house I'm buying. To fund the construction of the new house, I had been saving a little bit every month. I had tried to keep it a secret from Bob and never mentioned buying a new house. But what would happen if a selfish person like Bob found out? Fearing the worst, I discussed it with my parents. Who was on the phone? It was Bob. Hey, Dad, I know I shouldn't doubt, but did you tell Bob about the new house? I didn't say a word. He's still an outsider. The decision to build the new house was something we decided as a family. Thought so. I murmured. When I checked with my mother, she said she hadn't met him since the time he came over to greet us. This suggests that Bob might have heard about it from somewhere. We, as a family, thought it was necessary to discuss this with a lawyer. We decided to consult with a lawyer we knew, who's renowned for being exceptional. That being said, we needed to move our belongings to the new house. Come moving day, we had finally finished transporting all our items. But suddenly, a huge load of stuff arrived. Wondering what it was, I turned around to find Bob checking out the interior of the new house. From today on, you're supporting my parents. If you have a problem with that, we're getting divorced. He said. He said it loudly, snorted with satisfaction, and I smiled back, genuinely relieved. Finally, a real chance to get a divorce. No more suffering. The thought alone made me tear up. Seeing me suddenly cry, Bob looked puzzled and stared. Bob had always been the one acting selfishly. So, I thought I had every right to speak harshly to him. All right, I'm gonna start the divorce proceedings now. Huh? Don't lie. I placed the business card of the divorce lawyer I had on hand onto the table. Bob looked shocked and uneasy. I couldn't put up with Bob's selfishness. He never tried to understand my feelings or reconsider his own. I didn't want to be with someone like that. From now on, let's discuss matters through the lawyer. If you're going to complain about me not being able to support your parents, Bob, then we might as well get a divorce, right? No, wait. Don't take it so seriously. Okay? When was I not serious? Most of the time, I was the one bringing up divorce. To Bob, who was consistently refusing to accept the divorce, I decided to share something additional. That piece of information was about my dedicated counselor, Mike. Ever since we separated, I had been attending counseling sessions about once a month. The things he told me during those sessions genuinely shocked me. Mike suggested that instead of being codependent on Bob, it seemed more like I had been brainwashed. Such matters might be better explained if the person themselves was present. I immediately called Mike. Typically, a counselor shouldn't come over just because they're called, but I knew Mike had the day off today. Just by telling him how close we've become, he'd understand the relationship we've built. I heard the sound of Mike, who had been waiting at my childhood home, pulling up in his car to the new house. Reacting to that noise, Bob stood up and looked outside, appearing utterly shocked. Mike and I, when it comes down to it, have been childhood friends. During our counseling sessions, he often suggested he wanted to help me in some way. I couldn't recall when it started, but he seemed to have always had feelings for me. Mike, my childhood friend who just walked into the house, briefly looked Bob up and down. Then, after taking a few deep breaths, he began questioning Bob. Mike opened up his laptop, checking something. Sneaking a peek, it appeared he was reviewing the notes from our discussions. Finding what he was looking for, Mike began to speak. Bob, first, I believe it's crucial we have a serious conversation. From the start of her counseling sessions with me, Catherine has always been clear about a particular matter. How did you find out her family was buying a new house? Well, I heard it from Catherine's dad. He was boasting about building a new house. Hearing this, my father, who had been listening, glanced at Bob, murmuring, "That's odd. I've never mentioned it to you, Bob. I haven't seen you since you both came over to introduce yourselves as a married couple. Is that true?" "Yes, Catherine, it's true. I've only talked about the new house with you, haven't I?" Indeed, my father and I frequently communicated, and we often discussed the new house. I'd always made sure to share updates when Bob wasn't around. Given how much my father disapproved of Bob's selfishness, he always maintained a calm demeanor. Witnessing how composed my dad was, I felt motivated to stay equally poised. Bob, however, stubbornly retorted, "Look, I'm telling the truth. I saw you at the local supermarket and you..." "I haven't seen you there. You always said you were too busy with your caregiving job and left household chores to Catherine. I'm sure I haven't seen you since the day you both visited." But I believe Bob assumed my father would just go along with whatever he said. But my dad wasn't about to play along. Besides, Mike was smugly grinning, having helped me gather evidence. It wasn't like I'd been living a quiet life with my parents while separated from Bob. Having shared our entire marital situation, we'd planned our strategy together. Additionally, there was another concern: Bob's parents. I wanted to know the reason behind Bob's claim of supporting his parents. Conveying my concerns to Mike, he immediately called a lawyer he'd previously arranged. Clueless Bob watched our exchange, looking rather flustered. Shortly after, the doorbell rang, signaling the arrival of our lawyer. Upon Mike's invitation, the lawyer entered our living room. "Pleased to meet you. My name is Jonathan Peterson. Today, I'm here to discuss Bob's attitude towards Catherine and the divorce proceedings." "Hold on. This doesn't make sense. Catherine, why didn't you consult with me? Aren't we a couple? We should have talked this out." No matter how much Bob pleaded in his trembling voice, it wouldn't heal the emotional scars he inflicted on me. It was time for me to stand my ground. I want the freedom to choose who I'm with, and I certainly don't want someone like you again. With our family's tense atmosphere, the lawyer began to explain in a matter-of-fact tone. Firstly, regarding Bob's behavior towards Catherine. She got fed up with his constant complaints, proposed a divorce, but he refused. "Catherine, is that correct?" "Yes, it is." "Understood. From my findings, I've noticed something crucial. Before addressing the separation, there's another pressing matter. Are you willing to listen?" Of course, if it's important, I'd want to hear it. Nodding slightly, I uttered a simple, "Please proceed." And the lawyer nodded in response. To begin with, Bob's parents are in a dire situation. His father has an illness, leaving him immobile. He's been undergoing physical therapy at home but has grown irritable, yelling irrationally. As for his mother, like Bob, she worked in caregiving but faced multiple workplace issues and was eventually forced to resign. This is the first time I've heard that story. I was told that Bob wanted to pursue a caregiving profession because his mother was in the field. I had admired him for that, but it turns out that wasn't the whole story. Moreover, now I understand why he wouldn't discuss his father's situation in detail. It was because his father had become unable to walk due to an illness and had been treated horribly. I feel a bit sorry for him knowing that, but it seems there's more to it. The lawyer's expression darkened in an instant. Catching a quick glance from the lawyer, I nodded resolutely. "Bob, there was a 6-month period where Catherine didn't come home, right? Our investigations during that time revealed you were having an affair. Maybe you were stressed from your caregiving job, not having a decent family to return to, and always getting complaints from your wife. You frequented bars, drank heavily, spent nights with women in hotels, and even racked up debt." I was shocked by the lawyer's revelations. Doing such things behind my back. I truly felt that choosing divorce was the right decision. But after all, he was the person I had once deeply loved and chose to marry. It was impossible not to feel devastated, and tears started to flow. Mike and my parents stood by my side, as if shielding me. On the other hand, Bob looked shattered, every secret exposed. He looked at me, seemingly asking for help, but I turned away. Also, regarding the matter of Bob arriving here with all his belongings. Unfortunately, without the homeowner Catherine's permission, he's not allowed to just enter. He needs to reflect on his actions, agree to the divorce papers, and we're gonna need assurance that he won't interfere anymore. I admit it was wrong to come without notice. But I still love you, Catherine. I won't make you uncomfortable again. Please stay with me. Catherine. It's pointless, isn't it? If Bob's parents aren't reasonable, then Catherine's parents' opinions will be prioritized. After our discussions, it was determined that protecting Catherine is the utmost priority. If you'll agree to the divorce, we're willing to let it go. I'll convey this on Catherine's behalf. Seeing this, Bob looked defeated. With a face full of despair, Bob nodded in agreement, and his actions were closely watched by me, my parents, and Mike. Bob finally agreed to the divorce, and we all breathed a sigh of relief. I have nothing but gratitude for my parents and Mike for their support. I sincerely said, "Thank you." Afterward, I moved out of the house we once shared, leaving Bob behind. He was now responsible for all the housework. Moreover, Bob's parents moved in, and his mother began to boss him around to care for his father. Since he no longer had time for his caregiving job, he quit and began to work part-time. With his existing debts, anyone could guess he was struggling. Being constantly behind on monthly payments, Bob's spirits were down. And while Mike works at a mental health clinic, he seems to have made up his mind not to counsel Bob. Back in high school, when Bob had transferred to our school, he was a very quiet person. Even to Mike, Bob didn't seem to have a bad personality. However, when treated horribly by those around him, his character became twisted. Relationships, whether with spouses, friends, or lovers, influence us greatly. You can be influenced, but not trying to correct your wrongs isn't right. Mike commented. Yeah, I just wish he'd truly reflect on his actions. I replied. Exactly, I really don't want him to commit any more wrongs. Mike added. In response to Mike's words, I deeply nodded in agreement. All I can hope for is that he sincerely reflects on his actions. Mike and I grew closer because of the whole ordeal with Bob. Thanks to that, we decided to get married. Both our families seemed to understand and accept our decision when we told them about our plans to marry. Mike moved into the new house I bought. Since we mainly worked day shifts, we often went out. We watched movies, visited theme parks, sang at karaoke bars. As we spent our happy days together, I became pregnant. I felt so blessed living a life with the person I loved. When our child is born, a new chapter of our life will begin. I can't wait to start that new life. Holding on to dreams with Mike and discussing our roles before our child arrives, every moment feels precious. I'm determined to live a happy life moving forward. This might be what a true married couple looks like. There's no point in fighting, I've learned that from my previous husband. All I can think is that I should do my best to make my life work this time around. Divorce Dad while you still can. Excuse me? Words just slipped out without thinking. Because, after all, my daughter Mary had just woken me up this early morning to tell me that. Even for an adult, it's a heavy phrase to digest, so why is my daughter saying it? When I ask Mary to elaborate, she says, "You see, Dad's gonna say bye-bye to you." Wait, bye-bye? Is that true? Yeah. So you've gotta do it fast. It's not that I doubt Mary's words, but it's hard to believe that Richard would think that way. But, Mary's eyes are fixed intently on mine. Those eyes, far more serious than you'd expect from a 5-year-old. I can't believe those determined eyes would lie. All right. Mary, get ready now. With that said, we quickly packed our things and left the house. My name is Jennifer Smith. I live with my husband Richard and our 5-year-old daughter Mary. I met Richard during college and we married right after I graduated. I thought I'd support him as a housewife. But, when his job didn't pan out as planned, I had to work, taking a job at a local company. However, I became pregnant the following year. After discussing our future, I decided to quit my job. I thought I would focus on raising Mary and doing household chores, but it didn't go smoothly. The reason was Richard. After graduating from college, he got a job at a major company. But his naturally reserved nature and ineptitude caused him to not fit in and he quit shortly after. He hopped from one job to another, and finally got his current job 4 years ago. Richard seems to think that since he's held on to this job for 4 years, we're financially stable. But in reality, we're far from it. We're actually in a tough spot. With Richard's earnings, our future looks uncertain. I'm back. Welcome home. Here, for this month. After finishing work, Richard came home and handed me the month's living expenses right away. Thanks. Richard smiled happily at that and went into another room to change from his suit. I sighed watching him go. It's nice of him, but... I looked at the money he gave me and couldn't help but give a wry smile. We also have a daughter who's just 5 years old. She's at an age where she requires a lot of attention and care, and that costs money. The cost of living with her is incomparably higher than when it was just the two of us. So, it's natural that having a little extra cash would be helpful. But, there's a limit to that. The money my husband gives for household expenses is always $500. Honestly, it's not enough. Deep down I wish he'd give a bit more, but telling him that outright seems a bit harsh. Despite being a full-time employee, Richard's monthly take-home pay is only $1,500. The pay is so low that I sometimes wonder if his company is doing okay. Knowing this, I can't really ask for more. Especially seeing that ever-smiling face of his makes it even harder. There's another reason I can't say anything. Once, I told him I wished we had more money for expenses, and his reaction was intense. Do you expect me to give even more? Do you realize how hard I'm working for this little pay? I had just tried to discuss our increasing expenses since our daughter was born, but Richard got really mad. I should have considered his situation before speaking, but with all the child rearing I was busy with, I didn't have the time to think about his feelings. Then maybe you could consider finding a job that pays better. Stop nagging. I like my current job. You don't work, so don't comment on my choices. I'm sorry. Richard's generally a man of few words. To outsiders, he's seen as quiet and gentle. But at home, he acts like the head of the household, a real traditionalist, if you know what I mean. Even the smallest comment that he doesn't like will set him off. That has become a bit of a trauma for me, and now I'm always walking on eggshells when I talk to him. Then, at one such moment, "Are you okay, Mom?" "Huh? Oh, I'm fine, Mary. Thanks for worrying about me." "You're welcome." While I do work from home. Between taking care of Mary and doing house chores, I don't make as much as I'd like. During these challenging days, my little angel Mary always manages to comfort my weary heart. "Mommy, I've been good, so you gotta work hard, okay?" Saying that, she brought a glass full of orange juice with her tiny hands. "Thanks, Mary. After I finish work, let's go shopping, okay?" "Yeah." With a bright smile, my daughter looked so precious. I never want to make her go through tough times. If the money is tight, I just have to work harder. Thanks to my daughter's support, I've been able to focus more on work. Then one day, "I'm back. Mary, I got you a toy. Look, it's the one you've been wanting." My husband, who had never bought toys before, brought one for our daughter for the first time. However, when she saw the toy handed by her dad, she said, "I got this one from Mommy the other day." And she showed it to him. Suddenly, his face turned pale, and he snatched the toy from her and, in anger, threw it at her. Fortunately, it didn't hit her, but the mere thought of what could have happened is terrifying. "What the hell are you doing?" "Shut up." While we shouted at each other, our daughter cried uncontrollably on the side. Perhaps agitated even more by that, he moved towards our crying daughter. I instantly knew this was bad, so I shielded her. "Go away!" "No!" My husband raised his right arm and then swung it down. The sound echoed through the room. Then, without a word, he went to the back room, changed into his casual clothes, and headed out somewhere. I held my daughter tightly. "Mary, are you okay?" She wasn't crying like before, but perhaps frightened by a side of my husband she'd never seen. She trembled slightly in my arms. Once I felt she had calmed down, I headed to the bathroom. Wow. That's quite a bruise. A bruise that anyone could clearly see. Thankfully, it's not severe enough to warrant a trip to the hospital. However, I can't fathom why Richard got so angry. Was he upset because I bought a toy for Mary or because it was the same toy she already had? Still, the distrust I feel for my husband after what he did isn't easily dismissed. The thought of it possibly happening again is something I really don't want to dwell on. 2 hours later, Richard returned. Even though our eyes met, he didn't say anything and headed straight to the bedroom, grabbing his pajamas on his way to the bathroom. After his bath, he went straight to bed. I was scared he might do something again, but was relieved when he fell asleep immediately. I decided to sleep in the living room with Mary. I was jolted awake the next morning by a loud noise. It seems Richard had left for work. Yesterday's events flashed through my mind, making me let out an involuntary sigh. Beside me, Mary was sound asleep. I gently stroked her head, fervently hoping for an uneventful day. 3 months have passed since that incident, and thankfully, life has been smooth. Richard has been working hard as usual, and I've been taking care of the house and Mary while also managing my remote job, leading a life just like before. I'm home. Got a cake from that popular pastry shop today. Come on, try it. Thank you. Daddy, where's mine? Sorry, Mary, I didn't get one for you today. It's just for Mom. I'll get you one next time, alright? Ever since that day, my husband seems like a different man. He, who was always so reserved in public, began to talk more, stopped acting all high and mighty at home, and became kinder to me and Mary. Probably, that incident changed his perspective. However, there's one thing that still concerns me. It's the moment he hands me the monthly expenses. His salary remains meager as always. Yet, he started giving me his entire paycheck for household expenses. Here's for this month. Salary's still low, but this should be more than enough, right? Hold on, the whole thing again? We don't need this much. The extra I earn from working at home covers it just fine. Yeah. True. But hey, I'm the breadwinner of this family, right? If I only gave like $500 for expenses, wouldn't that be embarrassing? People would laugh if they knew. It's off-putting. Despite the changes, he seems entirely different. At that moment, I felt an indescribable unease. Hey Dad, let's play with me. Oh? It's been a while. Sure, what do you want to do? Let's see. It was a sight I hadn't seen in a long time. Until recently, my husband and Mary used to play together every day. However, after that incident, Mary had kept her distance from him. I was surprised when Mary, who had been avoiding her father, asked him to play with her. Watching them head to Mary's room, Mary glanced back at me for just a moment. Her eyes, at that time, seemed to be pleading something to me. 1 hour later, Mary came to the living room. The moment she saw me, she said that her father would be going on a business trip. Mom, Dad said he's gonna be on a business trip from tomorrow. A business trip? He didn't mention anything to me. He always used to inform me whenever he was leaving for a business trip, but this time he hadn't. Later, when my husband came to the living room, I asked him about the trip. It came up suddenly. Suddenly? When? Where are you headed? It's quite far. This one's a crucial trip and there are some secrets involved. I had never heard of a secret business trip. His inconsistent explanations made me feel uneasy, but I just went to bed that night. The next day, I was awakened by a clattering noise coming from the living room. What? Peeking into the living room. Sorry, did I wake you up? My husband was getting ready for a business trip. You're leaving already? Gonna start work as soon as I get there, so thought I'd leave with some extra time. It's good to be early, but it's only 5 a.m., isn't it? Why so soon? Well, I'm just a low-ranking employee. I should be there earlier than others arrive. Saying that, he quickly left for his business trip. His behavior felt off. Something was definitely amiss. Just as I thought that. Suddenly, our daughter woke up and said, "You should divorce Dad now." Excuse me? I unintentionally let out a surprised remark. I mean, for her to wake up this early and tell me to divorce her father was unexpected. Even an adult would be taken aback by such words. Why would my little girl say this? I asked her to explain in detail. He's planning to say bye-bye to you. Wait, bye-bye? Is that true? Yeah. So you have to act fast. It's not that I doubted what she said, but it was hard to believe that he'd think of such a thing. But her eyes, they stared straight into mine. Those eyes were more serious than you'd expect from a 5-year-old. There was something in that earnest look that made it hard to believe she was lying. All right, Mary. Let's get ready right now. Saying that, we quickly packed and left the house. A few days later, I received a frantic call from him. Hey, where are you? I came back from my trip and nobody's home, and all your stuff's gone. What's going on? Welcome back. How was your trip? Must have been boring going all alone, huh? What are you talking about? No use playing dumb. I know the business trip was a lie. My husband's business trips were all a lie. That's crazy. Why would I lie about a business trip? If you're so concerned, call the company. They'll set things straight. You'll see if I'm lying or if you're just paranoid. Oh really? Should I call them? Huh? You think if you say that, I won't actually call? Is that why you're being so bold? But the thing is, I'm certain you're lying. Because I already checked with the company. They told me you've taken a 3-day break, and asked if I hadn't heard about it. He let out a small gasp on the other end. My husband, who had left the house saying it was for a business trip, had been spending nights in his car, switching locations so nobody would spot him. Surprised, huh? My husband probably didn't think I'd go that far. Sure, the old me would have just believed what he said about his business trips and wouldn't have thought to call his company to verify. But this time, it's different. All thanks to our daughter. Mary told me that your business trips were lies. What? Mary? No way. There's no way Mary would know that. You must have put that idea in her head, didn't you? That's impossible. You know as well as I do that even though Mary's only 5, she's observant. She watches everything closely, including what we're doing and thinking. Despite being just 5, Mary has a mature perspective. Probably because of all the TV dramas I watch. She was always fussy as a baby. I thought she'd grow out of it, but with her, it lasted longer and was worse than I ever imagined. During those times, I'd often watch TV dramas while trying to soothe her. Even now, as she's gotten older, she continues to watch them habitually. From the latest shows to old ones and even 2-hour mystery dramas. If she can't watch it all, she'll record it to watch later. Her love for dramas even surprises me at times. Because of this, her way of thinking and speaking has naturally matured. You said it before, didn't you? That is the head of the family, it's your job to protect us. That you know what's best for the family. Yeah, I did. I am the head of this household. I know you guys better than anyone. Well then, you must know what I'm gonna say next. Yeah, of course. In that case, I don't hesitate to say I'm gonna divorce you. What? When I mentioned divorce, he naturally opposed it strongly. Divorce? Why? What don't you like about me? It's not about liking or disliking. I'm divorcing you to protect myself. Before you erase me. What? I don't get what you're saying. My husband suddenly grew silent. I pressed on. If you don't get it, then let me explain it to you. It all started when Mary told me she wanted us to get divorced. At first, I thought, divorce? Why? But right after that, when Mary said bye-bye, I realized she had picked it up from TV dramas. Mary, who loves any and all TV shows, especially enjoyed mystery dramas. In those shows, there are almost always scenes where someone dies. After watching them, Mary must have intuitively felt that causing someone pain and making them stop breathing was a bad thing. Every time one of those scenes played, she would say to me, "Hey Mom! That lady just went bye-bye. And earlier, it was a man. Is that guy bad?" That's right. People who make others go bye-bye like that are bad. I see. In other words, when Mary said bye-bye, she was talking about someone dying. And then she told me, "Daddy's trying to make you go bye-bye." If I hadn't been watching those shows with her, I would have never understood her. Had I not spent quality time with Mary, I wouldn't have caught on. And without a doubt, I would have ended up dead at the hands of my husband. You really think I'd do something like that? You must have said it 'cause it's the truth, right? Cut the crap. Why the hell would I want to harm my own wife? And you, believing something a 5-year-old says and then considering divorce? You've gotta be kidding me. It seemed like arguing with him was futile. At this point, I needed to show him undeniable evidence. If you're so adamant, I'll show you the evidence. Evidence of your attempt to take my life. Evidence? I hung up the phone, then sent an image to him. Moments later, he called back. Why do you have? Surprised? What I sent him was a detailed plan from his phone to end my life. When he returned from his business trip, he was gonna take me and Mary on a drive, drug us with a drink containing sleeping pills, leave us in the car, then pretend to be the one who found them. Worse, in the same vein, he intended to harm our daughter as well. A plan so sinister it was hard to believe anyone could think of it. By the way, I found out about this thanks to Mary. What? Previously, when our daughter Mary played with him. Mary hurried to her and said, "Mom, look at this!" She handed her his phone. On the screen was the entire plan he had come up with. The plan detailed his grievances against me. Despite him working as an office employee, I, working from home, earned more, which wounded his pride. Over time, his pride turned to jealousy. He began to think that without me, his pride would remain intact. So, he started researching ways to get rid of me online. You went through my phone! I didn't intend to. Not until Mary told me. The reason Mary knew what was on his phone dates back a while. Once, Mary asked him to watch a TV drama. However, my husband wouldn't give up the TV he was watching, so he told our daughter to play a game instead and handed her his cell phone. When our daughter unlocked the phone to play a game, she came across a screen she had never seen before. But that screen was the meticulous plan my husband had made to get rid of me. That screen was eerily similar to a plot from a TV drama she had watched. That's how Mary realized what he was planning. You had no right to snoop. How can you even say that? You realize what you were planning, right? I'm just glad I trusted Mary. If not, who knows where she and I would be now. He hung up without another word. Right after that, an email popped up on my cell. It read, "Don't think this is over. I've got plans too." 2 hours later, to my shock, my husband showed up at my parents' house. I knew you'd be here. How'd you know I was here? I always knew you'd run back home. It's pretty obvious. Behind me, our daughter looked terrified. Go to the back room. She nodded and headed to the back room. I never thought he'd come all the way to my parents, but now that he's here, I have no choice but to face him. So, what brings you here? Surely you're not trying to take us back, are you? That's exactly why I'm here. We're a family, after all. We should be together. Together? You, who's been threatening Mary and me? Give me a break. The confrontation continued. Don't worry about what happened before. I've changed. Let's live happily, just the three of us. For you and Mary. It's definitely a lie. I could see it in his eyes. I've told you before, I'm gonna divorce you. I've already consulted a lawyer. A lawyer, huh? Well, they mean nothing if I don't agree. That might be true. But it won't come to that. What do you mean? Then, I showed him something. Isn't that the plan I recorded? What's the point in showing me that now? Trying to threaten me with it? Even so, I ain't gonna divorce you. I'm not as low as to threaten you. If I did, people would think I'm just like you. What I did was tell the police everything, along with all the evidence. What? The cops? Of course. You think I wouldn't do anything when my own husband's trying to kill me? Hearing about the police, he looked enraged and lunged at me. I tried to shut the front door in haste, but he forced it open with his strength. You think this is a joke? He was a completely different person, not the mild-mannered husband I knew. In the face of his raging strength, I felt helpless. Mama! From behind, I heard Mary's voice. Looking back, I saw her, trembling in fear but still looking at us. She's so scared. It's okay, sweetie, Mama will protect you. Saying that, I felt a newfound strength. Maybe it's the power of a mother trying to protect her child? I tried with all my might to close the door, but his strength was beyond anything I imagined. I just can't anymore. It was then. What are you doing? At the same time as the voice, my husband was blown back, screaming in horror. Huh? Trying to make sense of what had just happened, I peeked outside through a small gap in the front door. Jennifer, are you okay? Dad! Just in the nick of time, my father appeared. Dad, why are you here? I thought you were on a business trip starting today. I forgot something at home. Just came back to grab it. I felt a huge relief knowing he was here, even if it was just a coincidence. But what the heck is going on here? Oh! Gulping in fear of my father's intense aura, my husband seemed to lose all strength in his legs and just collapsed right there on the spot. And it's understandable. My dad stands tall at 6 feet 3 inches, is built solid, having practiced judo during his school days. Even now, he keeps himself fit by hitting the gym regularly. He doesn't look a day over 60 with his impressive physique. Even the young and reckless would avoid messing with my dad. There's no way my husband could stand a chance against him. So, you gonna tell me why you're here and what you were planning to do to my daughter and granddaughter? Unable to bear the tension any longer, my husband tried to leave, tears streaming down his face. But in the next moment, several men grabbed him. Don't move! What the? Let go! Get off me! Struggling, my husband was subdued by several police officers, and was taken away right then and there. That was close. By the way, what brought Richard here? He probably came to say one last extreme goodbye. Later, my husband, who was arrested, was sentenced to 10 years in prison for attempting to harm me and my daughter. During that time, my parents, my daughter, and I moved far away, just to be on the safe side. I left all matters related to our divorce, child support, and property settlement to my lawyer, ensuring I didn't have to see my husband. Half a year later, I heard from my lawyer that my ex-husband was serving his sentence as a model inmate. However, after finishing his sentence, he's gonna work offshore, which means he won't be leading a decent life for quite some time. On the other hand, I've been living happily in our new home with my daughter and parents. Mary, could you take this over to Grandpa and Grandma? Yeah. Just be careful not to drop it. I'll be fine. These days, unlike before, our days are filled with laughter, free from stress. I sincerely hope these days last forever. I had reached my breaking point. I could literally feel my face transforming into a demon-like scowl. Then my husband was like, "Hey, what's with that face? Got any complaints? Frankly, it's your fault for only being able to do so much. Someone like me needs a proper wife. If you can't cook, then just get out from this house." At this point, anything he said wouldn't faze me. So, you're saying that? Fine. Are you prepared to be a homeless? With a chuckle, my husband was confidently like, "That's never gonna happen." He looked at me with a mocking smirk. But you know, acting like that will only last for now. Reality isn't always that kind. My name's Jessica, and I just turned 35 last week, a homemaker. After graduating from college, I landed a full-time job at a major company. I worked there for 3 years, but after marrying, I resigned and now work part-time in an office at a nearby supermarket. My husband, at the time, worked in the same company. His name's Brian. I first met Brian at the company's year-end party shortly after joining. I had always had a reason to skip these parties, but that time, there were spots, so I joined in. "Jessica, nice to meet you. I'm Brian Thompson. Let's enjoy the party together." "Oh, yes, nice to meet you." Among the bosses and colleagues around us, Brian confidently introduced himself. Even though it was a year-end party, I thought he had a lot of guts. And, surprisingly, he even knew my name. Although we worked at the same company, we were in different departments and had never met or spoken before. Well, I figured someone must have told him. This brought Brian and me closer, and we gradually began to take lunch breaks together. After getting to know him better, I realized that Brian was a confident person, always eager to move forward no matter what. The company we worked for was the biggest in this area, employing over 1,000 people. In such a large company, I was increasingly drawn to Brian's confidence and his approach to work. Then one day, "Jessica, will you be my girlfriend? I promise I'll make you happy. I'll always cherish you. Always." He didn't really have to go that far. But still, his earnest feelings made me happy. "Yes, I can't wait to spend more time with you. Please make sure you keep that promise, okay? Promise." And so, we became a couple. Supporting and challenging each other, we deepened our relationship. Our bond with each other's families also grew stronger. One day 2 years after we started dating. "Jessica, let's get married. I promise I'll make you happy. With me, you'll always be happy." His confidence never changed. I couldn't help but let out a small chuckle at Brian's words. "Yes, please make sure of it." We got married. We were blessed by many people around us, and our future was filled with nothing but hope. Then Brian had another surprise in store. "Actually, I bought a house. I wanted to make you happy, Jessica." That was a big surprise. Brian had bought a house for our married life. "Are you sure? Can you handle the mortgage?" "No worries. I'm a top-notch employee," Brian said with full confidence. I truly felt grateful for marrying Brian. And I strongly believed we'd build a happy home together. However, within a month of our marriage, his true nature surfaced. He had an enormous pride and was a dominant husband, the kind you rarely see these days. He was always like, "Men don't do household chores, that's a woman's job. I think you understand, now that you're a housewife, you gotta handle everything. Don't use the excuse that you're working." I couldn't believe he was this type of person. His side that he never showed before marriage left me in shock. He was like, "I was actually gonna show you this on our wedding day." Rummaging through his bag. "Found it." He pulled out a piece of paper and showed it to me. "What, a divorce procedure?" "Don't be so shocked. I just had it prepared in case something happened. Don't worry, I doubt we'll ever use it." It was a document which indicates divorce procedure and the lawyer's contact. Seeing the paper made me anxious about our future. From that day, our supposed-to-be happy marital life took a turn. Whenever Brian returned home from work, I had to immediately go to the front door and greet him, no matter what. Or else, Brian would get in a bad mood. Furthermore, he'd just take off his jacket and leave it without fixing it by himself. "Hey, can you stop tossing your jacket after taking it off?" He was like, "Huh? Isn't that the wife's job? It's not something a husband who's worked all day should do." As he stomped into the living room, throwing his bag onto the couch and stripping off his shirt right there. He'd be always like, Make sure it doesn't get wrinkled. Put the bag where it always goes. I wish he'd just do it himself, but if I said that, he'd instantly get upset. In the end, I'd end up tidying everything without saying a word. This wasn't what I had in mind, and I let out a heavy sigh. I feel like taking a shower first today. The bathroom's cleaned up, right? What? You're gonna take a shower before dinner? You usually eat first, so I was about to clean the bathroom now. Brian seemed to snap at my words, hurling harsh words at me. When did I ever say that I want dinner first after work? Don't make assumptions on your own. But don't talk back. You're my wife, right? Make sure you do things to always keep me in a good mood. After saying that, Brian grumbled and headed to the bedroom. It's such a hassle when he gets like this. If things don't go his way, he'd angrily storm off to the bedroom, lock himself in, and wouldn't come out. His behavior was just like a child. Naturally, if I don't apologize, he'd stay this way forever. I'm sorry. I should have been more considerate of your feelings. I promise I'll do better next time, please forgive me. That's how I end up, standing in front of the bedroom door, apologizing to Brian. Then, the bedroom door opened, and through the gap, Brian's face glared at me. If you understand, that's fine. But there won't be a next time. I nodded vigorously, and Brian emerged from the bedroom with a smile. Such incidents had become an everyday occurrence. Fast forward a month. Suddenly, a loud noise echoed in the back of my head. And the noise kept growing louder. In that instant, I found myself on the couch. Thinking back to the previous day, I vaguely remembered. Oh, I must have fallen asleep right here on the couch. I had dozed off on the couch. The daily grind of work and household chores had unknowingly piled on fatigue. Lifting my exhausted body, I checked my phone and saw it was already past 8 a.m. Oh no! I rushed to the bedroom and shook Brian, who was soundly asleep in bed. Brian, wake up! You're gonna be late for work! Brian, looking irritated, slowly sat up and rubbed his sleepy eyes, glancing at his phone by the pillow. What? 8 a.m.? Why didn't you wake me up? I'm sorry, I've been so tired lately. But you need to get ready fast. You're gonna be late. Are you kidding me? It's your job to wake me up. There's no way I can get ready in time now. I've never been late once. What if I get fired because of this? How are you gonna take responsibility? I had never seen Brian this furious before. No matter how much I apologized, Brian's anger showed no signs of abating. Instead, it seemed to intensify, and it reached a point where nothing I said would calm him down. Listen. As a punishment, clean the whole house today. If I come back and find even a speck of dust, I'll kick you out right away. With those harsh words, Brian left for work. Even if it was my mistake, I'm exhausted too. I wish he'd show a little concern for me. But the more I think about it, the more I hate myself for not being able to say anything. There's one person I always turn to in times like this. Morning, Mom. Sorry for calling so early. Can I come over? Morning, Jessica. That's fine. You're off work today? Yeah, I was scheduled to have the day off. All right. I'll prepare some coffee and wait for you. Take care on your way. Sorry, and thank you. My mother seemed to notice something was different with me. Did you and Brian have a fight? Why do you ask? You don't sound cheerful. And Jessica, whenever something's bothering you, you tend to apologize a lot. I've watched you more closely than anyone. It's obvious. Yeah. Her kind words brought tears to my eyes. Knowing this, she was like, I'll be waiting for you. And hung up. After quickly getting ready, I headed to my parents' home. My mother had coffee and cookies prepared. The moment I saw her face, all my pent-up emotions spilled out, and I burst into tears. And yet again, I apologized over and over. How much had built up inside me? Regardless, I just poured out everything. My mother listened patiently, nodding along, without showing any signs of irritation. Thanks to that, By the time I left, I was back to my usual cheerful self. Thanks, Mom. I'll be back soon. Yeah, take care on your way. When I got home, I immediately started cleaning. I'll be damned if I let Brian have the last word. I'll clean till I'm satisfied. 5 hours went by. Yeah. This should be good. I cleaned every nook and cranny of the house. There's no way Brian can find fault with this. Nodding in approval of my cleaning, I was like, what's next? I rolled up my sleeves and headed to the kitchen to start making dinner. Brian would be home soon. I had to get it done before that. And after about 2 hours of cooking, the sound of the front door opening broke the silence. Brian was home. I quickly went to greet him at the door. Welcome home. I proudly displayed the immaculate home in front of Brian, as if to say, look at what I've done. Yet, he didn't say a word, just headed to the bedroom, changed, and came back out. Hey, dinner. It's ready. Eat it while it's hot. Of course, dinner was also perfect. The table was lined with elaborate dishes. I had just made it in time. Even I couldn't help but admire how much I'd accomplished. I thought Brian surely couldn't find fault. However, Brian didn't show any reaction to the feast in front of him. He just began eating in silence. How's the taste? I tried harder with today's meal than usual. His response was, do this every day. What? What do you mean by tried harder? Just do this every day. Did he have any idea how long this all took? I'd spent the entire day cleaning the house and preparing this lavish meal, and still. His words were so cold that I was left in shock. He barely ate, simply putting down his knife and fork. Brian then got up, went to the sofa, and started watching TV. Aren't you going to finish? He ignored me. All right, I'll wrap it up and put it in the fridge, so eat it when you're hungry. Then, yet again, I heard cold words from Brian. No one's gonna eat that. Just toss it. I could see the smile on my face turn into one of despair at Brian's words. What are you doing? Throw it away already. If you won't, I will. With that, Brian began to get up. Wait, okay, I got it. I thought it'd hurt less if I threw it away myself. Without a word in response, I threw the dish into the trash can. The moment I did, my husband smirked at me. He was like, man, I'm beat today. I think I'll take a quick bath and maybe watch a movie. Oh, forgot to mention, I had a burger with my boss earlier. With that, he promptly headed to the bathroom. Everything made sense with Brian's words. He never intended to eat the meal I made in the first place. And the fact he said he'd clean the house was probably just a way to mess with me. If I hadn't cleaned, he would have just gotten mad. And if I had, he'd just complain it wasn't done right. My husband's earlier laughter said it all. Thinking back on it, the regret bubbled up. What am I even doing? As I tried to hold back my tears while doing the dishes, Brian came out of the bathroom. He plopped down on the couch and demanded a beer. I got some snacks and a can of beer from the fridge and brought them over. Brian, completely unaware of my tears, happily watched a movie, enjoying his beer and snacks. Hey, bring me another beer. I'm sorry, that's the last one. What? Only one beer left? You're kidding me. Here's some cash, go buy some now. He pulled out $50, throwing it at me. Picking up the dropped cash, I headed to a nearby liquor store. Maybe it was because the days have been getting warmer, but it was still slightly bright outside. As I walked alone, I felt like passers-by were looking at me. They must be looking at me with the same disdain Brian does. Through my life with Brian, I felt I had lost my sense of self. The next day, the sound of my alarm woke me up. Right. I fell asleep here again. I was on the couch. I was too afraid to sleep in the same room as Brian. As I let out a deep sigh, I sensed someone near me. Startled, I looked up to see Brian, already dressed in his suit. Oh. Good morning. I was out of it. I was so groggy just after waking up. Brian looked down at me from above. Then, he made a comment. "You're a failed wife." First thing after waking up, he was making sarcastic remarks at me. Still feeling dazed, I muttered an apology. But with a smug expression, my husband continued with his sarcasm. "Can you make a decent dinner tonight? I can't take another terrible meal like yesterday." With that, he left the house with an unsettling grin. The moment Brian left for work and I was alone, I felt a little lighter. Without a doubt, the stress from him was weighing me down. The thought of enduring this stress every day made me feel trapped, and I started feeling that being here was a bad thing. However, even so, as his wife, I still have to do housework. I pushed myself to start the usual chores. Time flew by, and before I knew it, it was 5 p.m. Brian would be home soon. I prepared dinner while keeping an eye on the clock, ready for my husband's return. He finally came home. I went to greet him at the door as usual. "Welcome home." Brian immediately responded. "After a tiring day at work, I have to come home to a terrible meal? This is torture." His sarcasm right after returning. But this sarcasm set something off inside me. Oh, right. Makes sense. Suddenly, I felt light as a feather. I headed to the living room, placing the freshly prepared food on the table. Brian, having changed his clothes, approached. Looking at the dishes laid out, he was like, "For a wife of a top executive like me, this is the best you can cook? You're failing as a wife." Saying this, he ate standing up. There was no decency in his actions. And he was like, "You know, the presentation and taste of the food are terrible. You're hopeless. It could hurt my chances of promotion." I had reached my breaking point. I could literally feel my face transforming into a demon-like scowl. Then, Brian was like, "Hey, what's with that face? Got any complaints? Frankly, it's your fault for only being able to do so much. Someone like me needs a proper wife. If you can't cook, then just get out from this house." At this point, anything he said wouldn't faze me. "So, you're saying that? Fine. Are you prepared to be a homeless?" With a chuckle, my husband was confidently like, "That's never gonna happen." He looked at me with a mocking smirk. "But you know, acting like that will only last for now. Reality isn't always that kind." Just then, Brian's cell phone rang. "Hey." "Yes." "Okay, I'm on my way." It was his boss on the other end. Being a competent worker is tough, always getting invites. The boss wants to grab drinks. Thank goodness. I can avoid your terrible cooking. He quickly changed and left for his night out. Then, I watched him go, coldly. 2 days later, as I dined with a friend, my phone rang from inside my purse. Pulling it out, I saw it was a call from my husband. I muttered like, "Again." Declining the call and slipping the phone back. Truth be told, in the past 48 hours, he'd called nearly 100 times. And every single call was from Brian. My friend asked if I was gonna answer, but I kept brushing it off. I just can't deal with my husband right now. I was aware he'd been trying to reach me, but I was just too busy to answer. And so, it was the same this day too. However, Brian, blissfully ignorant of all this, continued his relentless storm of calls. And tons of emails. Normally, one might become neurotic from such frequency. Ultimately, I didn't answer the phone until another 3 days later. "Can you cut it out? I don't have time to deal with you." "What the hell do you think you're doing?" "What do you mean?" "What do I mean? You disappeared from the house without saying anything." He seemed quite panicked about the current situation. "It's not without saying anything, is it? After all, since we're getting a divorce, it's only natural for me to leave the house, right? What are you saying now?" That time, when Brian cursed the food I made and told me to get out, then went out drinking with his boss right after that day. I immediately packed my belongings and left the house on the same day, placing the divorce procedure document I had on the table and contacted the lawyer. "Don't mess with me. I never said I wanted a divorce." Indeed, he hadn't said he wanted a divorce. But anyone would consider divorcing after being spoken to like that, repeatedly. It's not about whether you said it or not. Living with you made me decide to divorce. What do you mean by living with me? In the first place, when did you prepare the lawyer? Without even telling me. I was shocked that he remembered nothing at all. Even though he did it himself. Don't you remember bringing the document with the lawyer's contact soon after we got married? Oh. Remembered? I just contacted the lawyer and asked to proceed with it. Huh? That was just a joke. Who the hell takes that seriously? I'm right here. Besides, it's not something to joke about. Anyway, our life together is over. I don't want to be involved with you anymore, so please don't contact me. Oh, by the way, I will get a lawyer to handle the property division issue later, so wait until then. Saying that, I hung up the phone. However, 2 hours later, Brian took an action that I hadn't expected at all. He came to my parents' house. I found you. What are you doing walking in here like that? It's better than divorcing without consent, isn't it? This is exactly what they mean by he has a comeback for everything I say. My words only return in his selfish explanations. This has happened repeatedly. It's just an utterly pointless roundabout. Then my mother, who was sleeping in the back, woke up upon hearing our argument. Enough is enough. This is not the place to argue. With my mother's low and calm voice, Brian fell silent. All you've been doing is saying what you want to say, but essentially, this is a situation you've caused. I've been tolerating any and every situation just to lead a slightly happier life. I've been holding back on everything, job, housework, just gritting my teeth. What about you? Well, I'm the same. No, actually, I have it tougher. Can you understand the pressures of being an elite? Understand? What is he talking about? He had absolutely no idea how difficult it has been for me. Right, I'm not an elite, so I can't understand you. But, you see, I had my share of hardships too. So, let me tell you what I've done and how I got here. It might be a good time to put an end to this, especially since my mother is also here. Huh? I presented the reality to my clueless Brian. Do you think we could live in that condo without any trouble? Do you think we could live comfortably on the salary of the elite employee that you claim to be? That's a given. We could live there because I've been earning the money. He really didn't understand anything. A deep sigh naturally escaped from me at the incredibly carefree words of Brian. You really don't know anything. That's why everyone, including me, is leaving you. Everyone else too. Jessica. It's fine. He won't understand unless I explain properly. Brian looed like a child who didn't understand a subject and has no idea what to do. But that's only for now. The mortgage for the house is $1,500 every month. Plus utilities, water bills, and other living expenses easily exceed $4,000. So what? That mere $4,000 can be paid with half my salary. Is this guy really that dumb? Do you even know how much you actually take home? Huh? I'm an elite employee at a major company. Obviously, I easily make over $8,000. $4,000. That's your net salary. Huh? Whether he was learning this for the first time, my ex-husband was stunned upon hearing his own salary. You call yourself an elite, but you're like the lowest of the low in your company, a perpetual ordinary employee, aren't you? You overrate yourself, assume you're an elite, and consequently, you ignore instructions from superiors you don't like and assign unwanted tasks to others. Despite being overwhelmingly disliked by everyone around you, there's no way such a person can be elite, right? You're rather a prime candidate for layoffs. By the way, I was told this by your direct boss when I was an employee. That's a lie. Am I disliked? Brian was barely breathing from just this part of the story. But that alone would not satisfy me. It's shameful that you spend that mere $4,000 so freely, thinking you're supporting our living with it. Haven't you realized that it's me who has been sustaining our lives until now? Huh? In reality, ever since we were married, I was working from home, apart from my part-time job. My husband didn't earn much and spent money freely, being of no help for living expenses. So what to do? I have to work and earn, right? While you were living a foolish life, I worked desperately behind the scenes to keep our life afloat. That's how I had been supporting our married life. But honestly, it worked out well. My hobby of drawing illustrations turned out to be useful for work. Thanks to that, I got an offer from a major company to work as an exclusive illustrator. Thinking about it, maybe I should thank you for putting me in such a tough situation? My ex-husband, having learned everything, collapsed on the spot, rendered speechless. There he cowered, visibly shocked. Moreover, realizing his impotence, he began to sob uncontrollably. Then, my mother, who had been watching, spoke a word. I just can't forgive someone who treats my precious daughter horribly. So, I'm apologizing in advance. Don't get angry even if you face hardships from now on, okay? My mother's eyes, as she said this, were sharp like those of a tiger spotting prime prey. Seeing my mother's eyes, Brian let out a silent scream and ran away from the spot. Later, from what I heard from acquaintances, my ex-husband, whose behavior at work became a problem, seemingly got laid off from the company as rumored. Moreover, having lost his income, he couldn't pay the mortgage and quickly had to let the house go. However, the house he finally bought was sold for not much, and living off the remaining money, life in a rundown apartment was the limit. Furthermore, when the lawyer I hired started discussing the divorce, he barely could pay the lawyer services fee, and apparently, he couldn't even afford to live in the shabby apartment he had just moved into. Now, it seems he is living as a homeless person, rummaging through trash, somehow staving off hunger. On the other hand, as for me, I quit the office part-time job I had been doing and decided to work full-time as an exclusive illustrator for a major company. From there, my name gradually became known, and now I'm a sought-after illustrator. Jessica, here's your coffee. Thank you, Mom. Thanks to my mother taking care of things around me, I can focus on my work. Life that was once like hell is now heavenly. Mom, shall we go for steaks after a long time? Oh. Are you sure? Yeah. You always do so much for me. Well then, I guess I'll take you up on your kind offer. I'm going to cherish this life. Is today a day I can eat? Yay! The room went cold with that one comment. My grandson, David, was always lively and energetic, but he started hesitating to play outside. He used to be a bit chubby, but now he's slimmed down. Seeing this, I realized something was off and was like, why don't you tell me what's going on? As a result, my son and his wife began to make excuses in a panic. But realizing my son and his wife didn't grasp the gravity of the situation, I decided to lay down the law. My name is Karen. I'll turn 55 this year. I married my husband when I was 23 and had my son at 25. Ever since, I've been a homemaker, taking care of household chores. My son, James, is now 30. He married Lisa when he was 25, and they were soon blessed with a child. So, I have a 5-year-old grandson. My grandson's name is David. David has always loved playing outside, and whenever he came to our house, he would always run around in our yard. Whenever my son and his wife visited me, either my husband or I would always take David to the park. People say kids will be kids, and that certainly applied to David. My son and his wife would often bring David over to visit, but one day, I noticed something was off about David. He used to be enthusiastically like, I want to go play outside. Take me to the park, but for some reason, he didn't want to go out that day. When I asked like, don't you want to go outside? It's nice out and it'll be fun, he was like, but showing little interest in going out. I thought maybe he wasn't feeling well and decided not to press further. Luckily, we had lots of board games and cards that could be played indoors. These were the toys that James used to play with when he was a kid, stored in our closet, so I quickly took them out. Although David seemed happy, there were times he'd just blankly stare outside. I thought he might still want to go out and asked him like, if you're not feeling up to playing, how about a short walk to the store? David then looked at Lisa. Lisa, with a resigned expression, was like, only for a bit. At that moment, David cheered and began running around my house. He clearly wanted to go outside. I thought being stuck in a house with just adults probably wasn't much fun for him. I was about to get ready and take David out when Lisa suddenly stopped me. "Hold on a sec." In Lisa's hand was sunscreen, and she began applying it to the face and limbs of David standing next to her. "I've heard that UV rays can cause skin cancer, and getting sunburned hurts." I was impressed with how diligent Lisa was in this regard. After that, we headed to a store nearby, but on the way, David kept insisting that he wanted to play in the park. I was like, just for a bit, letting David play in the park. It had rained earlier that day, and the ground was muddy. David got his foot stuck in the mud. In that moment, he fell face first, his clothes completely covered in mud. Even his face was smeared with mud. I asked David like, "Are you okay? Any injuries?" But it seemed he wasn't hurt. However, his joyful expression from earlier had turned into one of despair. Reluctantly, I took the dejected David's hand and we headed home. Seeing the muddy David, Lisa was like, "What's this? I told you not to play." "Karen, please stop him next time," she exclaimed in a loud voice, scolding David. I was like, "Hey, kids will be kids. Things like this happen from time to time. I'll make sure to wash the clothes." I tried to calm her, but she was like, "That's not the point." Thanks to James intervening and calming Lisa down, the situation was diffused. However, it seemed my son and his wife had many strict rules at home. For instance, when I tried to give David some candy we had at home, Lisa was like, "We're trying not to give David candies. It spoils his dinner." I understood the concern about overeating from big bags, but they even refused small individually wrapped candies. Feeling bad for David but understanding that rules differ across households, I decided not to offer him any candies. Even after that, my son and his wife did visit, but their rules felt too strict. Whenever we ate out with my son, his wife, and David, they would always choose light meals at diners. Places like barbecue joints or steak restaurants, which kids typically like, were off limits. If that's their household rule, then it can't be helped. However, from my perspective, it seemed a bit too pitiful for the child. My husband and I would sometimes talk like, "Don't you think they're a bit too strict?" We took James to various places when he was young, didn't we? While my husband usually didn't say much, it seemed he felt the same way watching my son, his wife, and grandson. But we concluded it wasn't our place to interfere and decided to respect my son and his wife's parenting decisions. From that time, my son and his wife stopped coming to our house. Apparently, James got busier with work and couldn't make time. They used to visit once a week, so it felt like a sudden change. While we always looked forward to seeing our grandson, our son and his wife, we couldn't help but feel a tad lonely. We continued to communicate via messages, so I often received photos of my grandson. One time, something caught my attention. He seems to look more mature. David is turning 5 this year, but comparing his recent photos to the older ones, he did seem to look more grown up. They say kids grow up fast, but seeing this made me feel like he'd be an adult in no time, and I felt a bit melancholic. About 6 months had passed since my son and his wife stopped visiting. They informed us they finally got some extended time off. The idea of a dinner gathering came up. Considering their preferences, my husband and I suggested a slightly upscale traditional American restaurant. Once we got the green light from my son and his wife about the restaurant choice, we quickly made a reservation. The thought of dining together after such a long time was thrilling. I was so excited that I barely slept the previous night. The next day, eager to see my son's family, I arrived 30 minutes earlier than planned. After a short wait, my son, his wife, and David arrived, and we were led to our reserved table. "It's been a while, how have you been?" "Well, work's been busy, and I couldn't visit you often. But I managed to get a 3-day off. We're sorry for not coming around much." We were making small talk when I noticed something. David looked slimmer than before. He used to be a slightly chubby and adorable kid, but now he's become a slim boy who could easily be described as handsome. David seems to have lost weight. "Isn't he a bit too thin?" Is he eating well? Maybe he's lost his appetite because of the summer heat? He's eating just fine. You know, kids this age, their body type can change in a flash. Finding clothes was a real challenge. I had expressed my concerns about David's weight, but I was reassured that he was eating properly. After chatting for a while, our meals arrived. Being a multi-course meal, there was a lot to eat, but it was also a feast for the eyes. As everyone admired the dishes in front of them and reacted with delight, David, who had been quiet until then, suddenly spoke up. Is today a day I can eat? Yay! At that moment, I could feel the atmosphere in the room change. A day he can eat? What did he mean? I racked my brain desperately. Suddenly recalling how David's appearance became more mature, how he'd slimmed down out of the blue, and how he'd stopped playing outside, I arrived at a conclusion. If my suspicion was correct, it would be a significant issue. I decided to bravely ask my son and his wife. I've been wondering for a while now, are you making David eat properly? James and Lisa avoided eye contact. My son was like, of course, we make sure he eats. He even eats any veggies and doesn't have any dislikes. Isn't that right? And his wife was like, yes, he always finishes whatever I cook. I wonder why he suddenly said it's a day he can eat. Kids can be so mysterious. They seemingly dodging a topic they'd rather not discuss. I've had a vague feeling for a while now that my son and his wife weren't giving David enough food. Given that he used to be a bit chubby, I thought they might be managing his meals out of concern for him gaining more weight. But looking at David now, that just doesn't seem to be the case. Not only had he lost weight rapidly, but he also looked listless and pale. David, I want to ask you something. Are you getting enough to eat? He responded with a shocking revelation. Looking at the elaborate meal set in front, David was like, yeah, I do eat. But, you know, Mom and Dad only let me eat like once every 2 days. I once tried to sneak some snacks and got yelled at. Is today not a day I can eat? After hearing from David, I turned to James and Lisa and was like, could you please explain what's going on? They started to spill the beans. Apparently, they wanted to get David into a talent agency. But apparently, since David used to be a bit on the chubbier side, they were advised by an agent that it might be better for him to lose a little weight. So, for the past 6 months, they'd been restricting his diet to get him to this point. They'd even prevented him from playing outside and ensured he wore sunscreen to maintain flawless skin. When I asked why they wanted to get him into a talent agency, they said that as they walked around downtown, he was asked once, leading them to hope that he might become a big name in the entertainment world. While they haven't signed him up with a talent agency yet, they plan to formally apply in the near future. But he's still 5 years. How is he gonna balance that? I find it hard to believe you have his best interests at heart when you're not even feeding him properly. I said, my husband nodding in agreement. The entertainment industry is a tough world. We want David to be able to shine there too. Cut the crap. Kids need to eat every day. Especially growing ones. You better start making him 3 meals a day right now. For the first time, I raised my voice at my son and his wife, making them flinch. James was like, if Mom feels that strongly about it, we'll make sure he eats properly, seeming to be persuaded by my insistence. That day, David had a full meal set in front of him, just like the adults. He ate all without leaving anything. From then on, I made it a routine to call my son and his wife every day to ensure that David eats properly. They not only assured us that they were making him eat properly, but they also sent pictures and shared the day's menu with us. My husband and I felt reassured and carried on with our daily lives. About 3 months after our dining experience with my son, his wife and David, we had to travel to their area for some business. After finishing our business, we decided to visit our son's house right away, skipping lunch. Long time no see. Lunch will be ready soon, please wait in the living room. Lisa ushered us to the living room, where we found James and David hanging out. David looked much healthier than before, with a fuller face suggesting he'd been eating properly. After some chit-chat, Lisa entered the living room with dishes of food. Everyone gathered around the table, but there was a separate dish with noticeably smaller portion of food. Before I could express my surprise, David took his seat in front of the small portion. "Isn't that a bit too little?" Lisa was like, "It may seem so, but any more and he'd gain weight," as if there was nothing wrong. Frustrated and realizing they might not heed my words any further, I excused myself for a moment and called someone. The person mentioned it was available at the moment, so the person could come over right away. While we were enjoying the meal they had prepared for us, someone knocked at the front door. "I wonder who that could be, we weren't expecting anyone." "It's someone I called," I replied as I went to the door to welcome in my old acquaintance. "Hello, I'm John, a nutritionist." John is a friend of mine, who works as a nutritionist specializing in child nutrition. He mainly educates children about nutrition and happens to live near my son's house. John was like, "Are you aware of how bad it is not to make David eat enough?" Starting with those words, John explained the importance of children having proper meals and how nutrition helps build their bodies. After listening to John for about 2 hours, James and Lisa seemed quite impressed as they looked over the recipes he gave them. They were like, "Wow, I didn't know there were recipes like this. Having these recipes might make it easier to prepare meals," showing some understanding of the importance of nutrition. Still worried, I began bringing food to my son's house from time to time. Each visit reassured me that David was being fed properly, but they still seemed keen on getting him into the entertainment industry. Apparently, they recently applied to a talent agency, and James and Lisa were anxious about the outcome. After some time, they informed me that he had been accepted. While I was happy for them, I couldn't help but feel uneasy. Would they really prioritize David's well-being? Day by day, as they updated me about David's progress, I carried these thoughts. One day, after my husband left for work and I was doing my usual chores, someone visited me at home. I wasn't expecting anyone, so I thought it might be a salesperson and considered ignoring it. But the person kept knocking at the door. Thinking it might be an emergency, I opened the door, only to find David, crying. "David! What happened?" I was so taken aback by surprise, but I quickly brought David inside. I figured David's house was quite a distance from here. But my immediate concern was to calm David down. I gently rubbed his back and waited for him to stop crying. After a while, he seemed to settle down and began to explain why he had come here. David was like, "When grandma is around, they feed me properly, but when you're not, they hardly feed me at all. They even threw away a candy my friend gave me. I just can't take it anymore." I thought they had understood me, but it seems they hadn't. He was put into the talent agency, but he said he really didn't want to be there. He has lessons every day, but because he's made to dance without having eaten, he feels like collapsing all the time. When the instructor sees this, they tell him to take a break, but Lisa, watching from the side, tells him not to rest. Even at home, he's shown various shows. One day, Lisa was like, "We want to style you like this, maybe cut your hair a bit shorter. Also, you've been getting a tan lately, so no going outside." Then David was like, "But I have plans to meet my friends soon." However, Lisa was like, "Cancel it. If you're thinking about your future, you'd better do as I say. If you become a famous dancer, acting would be next. We'll consider more after a small success." He wasn't even allowed to go out with his friends. Realizing there was nothing more I could do on my own, I decided to contact Child Protective Services. Although hesitant because it involved my own son, I knew I couldn't stay silent any longer. With that in mind, I quickly dialed Child Protective Services. They wanted to grasp the situation as soon as possible and said they'd visit James and Lisa's home the next day. I let David stay at my house that night, informing his parents of the decision. James was like, "I'm concerned about David and will come over after work." But knowing the current state of David, I couldn't let my son and his wife meet. I steeled myself and responded like, "Please don't come. Even if you do, I won't let you in or let you see David. You both need to reflect on what you've done." The next day, I took David to the hospital for a thorough checkup, and the results were far worse than I had imagined. David was malnourished and seemed to be showing symptoms of asthma. His frequent near-fainting episodes appeared to be due to anemia, and he was immediately put on N4. Believing it unsafe for him to return, I decided to keep David with me, but my son and his wife vehemently objected. They exclaimed like he's our son. Isn't this basically kidnapping? However, once the Child Protective Services arrived and spoke with them, they begrudgingly accepted that I'd take care of David. And later on, it was established in a meeting at my son's home that not providing meals doesn't constitute as physical punishment and they wouldn't be legally charged. However, due to the negative impact it has on a child, they were urged to change their attitude towards David. During the discussion, the child welfare representatives repeatedly advised against getting David into the entertainment industry, but the two of them, my son and his wife, were not convinced at all. Lisa argued like, how would we know unless we try? Maybe it'll work out. Can you please not meddle in our family matters? Watching their exchange, my husband and I realized that it'd be tough for James and Lisa to raise David happily. We considered adopting him. At first, they opposed, but when a lawyer got involved, they quickly changed their tune. Anticipating something like this, I had asked the lawyer, who's a friend of my husband's, to come over just in case. After adopting David, James and Lisa seemed to lose their spark. It seemed that making David a celebrity was their passion in life, and James apparently stopped going to work altogether. Lisa might have finally realized the importance of their son, expressing a desire to take David back, but it's too late now. I doubt I'll ever hand David back to them. Still, if they genuinely repented, I thought it might be good for them to see him from time to time. After all, for David, his biological parents are essential. Speaking of David, when he met his biological parents, his behavior seemed somewhat formal and distant. It's as if he recognizes them as the people who didn't take care of him, and it's unclear if he sees them as parents at all. He must have felt a significant amount of stress living in that household. If only I'd realized sooner. Such regrets whirl inside me. The adoption process had its challenges, but David officially became a part of our family. 1 month after the adoption. David is thriving. Sure, he eats more than other kids, but as long as he gets plenty of exercise, it shouldn't be an issue. He's a kid who loves playing outside, so when we give him a soccer ball or a bat, he usually joins the neighborhood kids. David has such a sociable personality. He quickly gets along with other kids. When he comes home muddy, he excitedly shares the events of his day. During the time he lived with my son and his wife, perhaps due to stress, he started speaking less and less. But now, hearing him share his stories brings me immense joy. David's gonna start elementary school soon, and with the way things are, I'm not worried at all. I'm certain he'll make lots of friends and come home covered in mud as usual. But one thing has been nagging at me. The concern was, did my husband and I make the right decision in adopting David? After all, when we became older, might there be comments or criticisms from those around us? I also wondered if David might be concerned about that very thing. So, I decided to ask David how he truly felt. I asked him like, did you want to live with your dad and mom? Are you happy now? He was instantly like, I'm super happy. My old home felt very gloomy, and I hated being there. But now I can play outside and eat delicious food, so it's much better than before. He was like, I did feel a little sad when I left my dad and mom, but I love grandma and grandpa too. Thanks for always being with me. Hearing David's words made me genuinely relieved that my actions back then weren't a mistake. And I decided that if I ever come across a child in need, I'd act without hesitation to help them. A housewife who doesn't cook ends up divorced, you know. Tom punched my belly lightly. I didn't think he used much force. But that was where my precious baby is. Hey! Stop it! Surprised by Tom's unexpected action, I reacted excessively. Tom, seeing me like that, chuckled. If you don't like it, hurry up and make lunch. Look, even the baby is saying it. Poor dad's starving because of mom. Fine. I got it, so stop. Just not my belly. Don't hit my belly. I screamed in a voice resembling a scream, and Tom finally stopped. I'm tired. Just do as you're told from the beginning. Hurry up and make it. Dash, like a sprinter. Tom said that, looking satisfied. Then he froze as he looked at the computer screen in front of him. Huh? I somehow got off the chair, distanced myself from Tom, and said while restraining him with scissors nearby. This time, I won't let you make excuses. Well, there shouldn't be a need for that. This is a lie, right? With this, I won't let him escape. This time, I'll expose his true nature. I am Hannah, 29 years old. I work for an electrical appliance manufacturer, but I'm currently on maternity leave, so I'm pretty much like a housewife. The reason for saying pretty much is because there's a reason. Doing some odd jobs and irregular remote meetings. I'm allowed to participate in those. That's because, due to my pregnancy, I entrusted the project I was involved in to my junior. I asked to participate to understand the flow of things. However, I rarely speak and am more of a bystander. Even so, I was happy to be able to participate and know the progress of the project. Seriously, that's just labor. It's a waste of time, and it's annoying. Stop it. Complaining in this dissatisfied tone is my husband, Tom. He's 36 years old, 7 years older than me. He was originally my boss at work. Tom, who was good at his job, was always relied upon by those around him. I was gradually drawn to him by his kind guidance. Getting married to Tom was fortunate, and people around us envy us, but he changed after marriage. Don't say that. Even if you call it work, I'm just doing odd jobs and attending meetings, right? Sometimes, I'm just observing. That's a waste. How about cleaning the room if you have that much time? I saw dust accumulating under the furniture recently. Tom pointed to the TV rack and the floor gap. It was a place I couldn't clean without bending down. I'm in the last month of pregnancy, and with this belly, it's impossible to bend down. So, it's true that I've been neglecting cleaning in that area. I'm doing what I can for now, but I'm sorry. In a situation like this, normally the wife's parents would come to help with household chores. But you don't have that. Ken said with a sigh. My chest hurt. My parents passed away in an accident 10 years ago. It's been 10 years already, but it still feels like 10 years ago. Yet, Tom casually makes fun of me for not having parents like I do now. And I always had to apologize. I'm sorry. I'm causing trouble. Then, Tom would always smile satisfied. You're lucky. Being able to marry a generous guy like me. I never thought I'd marry an ordinary woman like Hannah, with no special qualities. This is how Tom satisfies his ego. Every day is a barrage of sarcasm or bragging. He wasn't like this before we got married. Is it inevitable for people to change after marriage, regardless of gender? Furthermore, it's unfortunate that Tom has such a great facade that nobody believes me, no matter who I complain to. I get off-target responses like, "You're just being spoiled." Or, "It's good to be reliable." As everyone says, I could endure this much and just let it go. But recently, I've been troubled by Tom coming home after work. From the evening to the night, when the sound of trying to unlock the door, it's the signal of him coming home. Even if I was in the middle of doing some housework, when he comes home, I'd rush to the front door. And as I look at the opening door, I pray. I hope Tom is in a good mood today. When he's in a good mood, I only receive reports like, "The company did well." Or, "I secured a contract." The problem is when he's in a bad mood. So annoying. Acting all high and mighty like it's a business deal. That outdated guy. The moment he enters the door, Tom stomps his feet, making a loud noise. Welcome home. He tosses his bag towards me and heads to the bath, clicking his tongue. I was really scared of this whole sequence of actions. I considered divorce when this continued for several days. I first consulted with a colleague, but he didn't believe me. Tom? That's impossible. You're exaggerating. Look, you're pregnant and maybe tired, right? How about taking a break for a change of pace? The response was as if he was implying that I was the one being strange. It's sad, but I understand my colleagues' feelings. Tom, when we worked together, was perfect in everyone's eyes. Always smiling, gentle, and calm. I don't think even my past self would believe that he could transform like this. Maybe it's just a passing phase. Perhaps he's becoming irritable because he's busy and tired. I decided to think positively. It's not like he's hitting me or anything. When he throws things or shouts, my body flinches, but he has never physically harmed me. Someday, he'll return to being the kind person he used to be. I hoped and prayed for that. No one would believe that Tom has changed. But except for one person. That's my Uncle Bob. My grandparents live far away, and my parents passed away. After the accident, I was left alone, but I had one reliable relative. That's my Uncle Bob, my father's younger brother. Because he moved to the city before my father did, he happened to live near our family by chance. Honestly, Bob looks scary. He's 6 feet 3 inches tall and has a good physique, so just standing there, he exudes an intimidating presence. However, he's incredibly kind and a wonderful person on the inside. When I was young, instead of my busy parents, Uncle Bob would often play with me. Back then, I thought of Bob as unemployed. That's how much he kept me company. I think he cared for me like a real daughter. You know, I was the first one to hold Hannah in my arms. He often joked like that and bantered with my father. So, after my parents passed away, it was indeed Bob who supported me. In my days, Bob took care of most of the procedures for me. When I didn't even feel like eating, he would make light meals like oats porridge or soup. I remember that I couldn't really say it was delicious, but I inadvertently put it in my mouth. After my parents' accident and my subsequent dropping out of college, Bob was the one who introduced me to a job. When I hesitated, feeling sorry for using connections, Bob said gently, "Don't get it wrong. It's just an introduction. It's up to Hannah how you work from here on out." I don't know. Unable to repay my parents, I want to repay Bob. That was my goal. I had put up with a life with Tom, who just spewed abusive language. But one day, Tom finally raised his hand against me. At first, it might not have been intentional. Tom was in a worse mood than usual that day, and I knew I had to be careful. But I was also not feeling well and didn't have the patience. So, I inadvertently muttered to the point against Tom, who would pick on everything. "Oh, shut up." The moment I said that, I knew the room had frozen. I messed up. I needed to apologize quickly. I immediately apologized, but it was too late. A magazine flew right by my face. Tom had thrown it in anger. "Hey! What did you just say? Did you call me noisy when I came home tired? Hey!" From there, it was useless to say anything. Tom kept throwing things one after another. Fortunately, he had rational, even though seeming crazy. Everything he threw was light or thin. Maybe because he had done it once, the threshold had become lower. From that day on, Tom, though weak, would raise his hand at me over trivial things. Scared, I thought of consulting Bob. Actually, Bob worked at the same company as us. He had introduced me to this company because he could be flexible with various things in the company. Tom hadn't said anything about Bob, so he probably didn't know they worked at the same company. But I had introduced him once, so he recognized Bob as my family. I was sure Bob would believe me. I had that kind of conviction. But, unfortunately, Bob was on a business trip abroad at that moment. Worried about me, Bob offered to listen to me over the phone if that was okay. For a moment, I thought I should lean on him, but Bob is that Bob. If he knew my current situation, he might rush over. That wouldn't be fair to the company and Bob. Helplessly, I decided to wait for Bob to come home. By the way, I also consulted my colleague and friends, but nobody believed me. Moreover, somehow, the fact that I was talking about Tom reached Tom himself. Tom apparently laughed sadly, was like, "I intended it as a form of physical closeness." Everyone completely believed this excuse. Thanks to that, I ended up being treated as just an overly self-conscious wife. One day, as I was working in my room as usual, Tom came by. It was unusual, Tom's day for remote work too. I knew this in advance. "I'm hungry." "What about lunch?" Tom said, almost tossing it out there. "Oh, just wait a moment. I'm working." Tom let out an irritated sigh. From that tone, I immediately understood. He's coming. The usual one. I instantly tensed up and prepared myself mentally. Usually, it's either the arm or the leg. And Tom approached me with a nasty grin on his face. A housewife who doesn't cook ends up divorced, you know. Tom punched my belly lightly. I didn't think he used much force, but that's where my precious baby is. "Stop it, please!" Shocked by Tom's unexpected actions, I reacted excessively. Up until now, he never went for my belly, no matter what. I curled up on the chair, trying to protect my belly with my own arms. Tears welled up from fear and anxiety. Seeing me like that, Tom laughed in amusement. "If you don't like it, then make lunch already. Come on, even the baby is saying it. Dad's hungry because of Mom." "Ouch! Please! Please, just don't hit my belly." Why would he do something so cruel? I'm his wife, and the one inside my belly is our child. I couldn't comprehend it at all. I don't want to do this thing. But, you know, it can't be helped. "You don't make lunch. Dad's pitiful, huh?" While speaking like that, Tom's hand didn't stop. He persistently hit my belly over and over. I couldn't resist much because I was seated in a chair, making it difficult. All I could do was defend myself as best as I could. "Okay. I get it. Please stop. Just don't hit my belly." Screaming in a voice similar to a cry, Tom finally stopped his hands. "I'm tired. It would have been fine if you just did as I told you from the beginning. Hurry up and make it. Dash over." Saying that, Tom lifted his face, looking satisfied. And then, he froze as he looked at the computer screen in front of him. I somehow got off the chair, distanced myself from Tom, and said while restraining him with the scissors that were nearby, "I won't let you make excuses this time." "Well, there shouldn't be a need for that." This is a lie, right?" Answering Tom, who was all pale and flustered, was a person on the other side of the computer screen. "I want to believe it's a lie too. I never thought you'd be such a despicable person." The one holding his head in his hands on the screen was the department head. Several other employees were looking at us with disgusted expressions. "No, it's not like that. I didn't hear anything. Yeah. I was set up. I was tricked." Tom clung to the computer, almost groveling to the department head. "You have a bad reputation. Didn't I tell you? I said I was in the middle of work, so wait. I didn't lie or deceive anyone." "If that's the case, then say you're in a remote meeting properly. If you did that, then Tom started to say, then stopped himself, his face pale with realization. He was about to say, "If you did that, then I wouldn't have hit you." He's a guy who cares a lot about appearances and what others think. Tom, a sly and cunning man, he wouldn't even rouse his hands against another person's or utter foul language at work. That's why nobody would believe me even if I complained. I felt a sense of despair at that time. However, after some thought, I realized something. If they wouldn't believe me, I needed evidence. Since I found out that Tom had a remote meeting today, I had secretly planned to expose his true nature. I just didn't expect him to attack my belly. It was my fault for being careless. Anyway, everyone at work is witnesses, so there's no escaping this now. Let's get a divorce. I don't want to see your face anymore." "No way! Hannah, without you, As Tom uttered these pitiful words, someone started knocking at the entrance. As I was about to go, Tom stood in my way, trying to obstruct me. "Wait! We're in the middle of a conversation. Is it okay to raise your voice like that? The computer is still connected." "Oh." I quickly slipped past the distracted Tom and rushed to the entrance. However, I was caught before I could get far, and my arm was grabbed by him. "Stop! Let me out! This place is out of sight from the computer, just perfect. Hey, let's come up with an excuse together. Should we make it a prank? That's the safest bet. It's more credible if you say it, so tell everyone." "No, I won't. I don't want to gauge your mood anymore, be treated like a slave, and be dominated by fear." "Someone, help!" I screamed in my mind. At that moment, I heard a rattling sound from the entrance, and the door swung open vigorously as someone entered from outside. Seeing the person's face, I collapsed on the spot in relief. "Are you okay, Hannah?" It was my Uncle Bob, who apparently secretly joined that meeting. He had watched the video and rushed to our house immediately. Luckily, the front door was left unlocked. "Does it hurt anywhere? How about your belly?" Bob rushed to my side, pulling me away from Tom. And then Bob shielded me with his back. Thanks to Bob's broad back, I couldn't see Tom. Most likely, Tom couldn't see me either. "Hi, Bob. You're Hannah's uncle, aren't you? Long time no see." As I secretly glanced from behind Bob, the cunning Tom offered a forced smile. Bob, straightening his posture, looked down at Tom. Bob is taller, making Tom appear very small and delicate. "Hannah, can you stand? You should rest on the sofa over there." Ignoring the Tom, Bob moved me to the sofa while supporting me. Sitting down brought some relief. Tom tried to approach me, but Bob stopped him with grim face. "Rest for a bit, then let's go to the hospital just in case." "That's too much. It was just a little shove. It's part of our intimacy as a couple." How could he perceive it that way? "Just stay quiet. Once we confirm Hannah and the baby are okay, we can talk. Don't worry, the meeting was recorded, so you can relax." "You were watching that? So, we are in the same company." Tom clicked his tongue in frustration and fell silent. "Really, what a terrible man you married, Hannah." Seeing Bob sigh with a stern expression, I felt somewhat apologetic and couldn't say anything. I went to the hospital and confirmed that there were no problems with the baby in my belly. I felt relieved, and my whole body relaxed. With that, Bob and I, along with Tom, headed to the company. Bob was like, "Think yourself and the baby first. Leave the rest to me." But in the first place, this is a matter between Tom and me. Even if it's Bob, I can't leave everything to him. There could have been a different day to address this, but it's about Tom. The more time we give, the more he might come up with something. I'm already in the last month of pregnancy, and I don't know when labor pains might come. It's best to settle this quickly now. I am a mother. I have a duty to ensure that this baby can be born with peace of mind. When we arrived at the company, we were immediately led to a separate room. It seemed Bob had made the arrangements. There must have been testimony from the employees present at the meeting. In the spacious conference room, the meeting members, Tom and I, and Bob were gathered. Bob handed me my bag, and I took out a piece of paper from inside. It was with a contact number of lawyer who assists divorce. I had prepared for it a long time ago and kept it in my bag. Tom's face contorted for a moment, but then he smiled uncomfortably. I also have some blame for things being misunderstood. I'll accept the divorce. I don't really care about the division of property. I'll pay child support too. Perhaps because we were in front of everyone, he was strangely understanding. With Tom's acceptance, the conversation proceeded smoothly. However, when we reached a certain point, Tom froze. "Quit the company or be transferred?" "Yes. I plan to return after my maternity leave and child care leave. It wouldn't be good for both of us if you were still here, right? So, I really want you to quit." Tom looked at me seriously and nodded. "I see. But what about the company's perspective? What are you trying to say?" "I don't mean to brag, but I think I'm a valuable asset to the company. I have good performance. No problems with relationships. And I have a good reputation with our business partners too." Indeed, Tom, with his pleasant demeanor, was considered the ace of the company. a so-called immediate contributor. If things continued this way, it was said that he would undoubtedly become an executive in the future. On the other hand, Hannah is, for better or worse, an average female employee you can find anywhere. Oh, I'm not belittling you. Just stating the facts. I understand. Furthermore, if you're a single mother with a small child, you'll inevitably have more time off in the future, right? You'll surely become a burden to the company and your colleagues. I had thought about this when I became pregnant. I don't have parents to rely on. If something happens, I have to figure it out myself. That's unavoidable, but for the company, I might honestly be a troublesome employee. I understood what Tom was trying to say, even if I didn't like it. He was implying that the company would choose him, an ace and valuable person, who brought complicated risks even though he caused the problem this time, over me. See? So, the best thing is to let this incident go and get along again. It's the best for the baby too. I don't want that. Tom looked bewildered. Tolerate and accept it again? Are you kidding me? That won't change anything. Do you want me to endure the hellish days of being constantly insulted again? The employees whispered among themselves, looking at Tom with puzzled expressions. Especially the female employees were giving him cold glares as if he were a bug. Because we're a couple, we've had our disagreements. But it should be mutual. Is that mutual? The ratio is way off, don't you think? I was always the one being pushed around. As I retorted, Tom seemed unable to hide his agitation. You're like a completely different person. What happened to you, Hannah? Well, until now, I've been patient. I had hoped that you might change someday. But I never thought you'd lay a hand on our baby. The surroundings' gazes became sharp in an instant. Tom chuckled sheepishly. Sweat trickled down his forehead. Hannah, that's why. Going back to the conversation, let's leave the decision of who will quit to the company. Is that okay? Tom responded energetically. I wonder he was confident that if it's in the case he would be the one chosen. Well then, we'll proceed with the divorce right away. Thanks for your efforts. Starting now, you and I are strangers. Hang on, Hannah. Goodbye. I wanted to get away from this person as soon as possible. With my Uncle Bob accompanying me, I went to consult with the lawyer for divorce process. By the way, the Tom seemed to have some strange confidence, but his resignation was certain. It's a bit underhanded, but Bob is our president, in other words, the head of the company. Since the president is on my side, I already know the outcome. It feels a bit unfair, though. Muttering that, Bob furrowed his brows with a stern expression. What? The one at fault is that guy. He doesn't even remember the face of the company's president, let alone act like he's some valuable talent. So arrogant. I vented a bit to Bob. His face turned red with anger. Thanks to talking a lot, I felt refreshed. So, on the way back to home, we had a conversation eagerly anticipating the birth of my baby. I have no more worries. I can give birth in peace now. A few days later, I gave birth safely. It was a cute girl. Bob came to the hospital, tearing up like it was his own grandchild. I received a message from Tom saying, I want to meet her. Did this person forget what he did before my baby was born? I replied like, I can't meet you, it's too dangerous. I want to cut ties with him, but I don't want to risk him getting angry, so I've made the messaging app a way to communicate. By the way, I receive daily updates on his situation. After being fired from the company, he got a job in the same industry. But, because it's the same industry, rumors about Tom are already circulating. He lamented like, everyone is cold to me, and I can't even get a girlfriend. According to his colleague, Tom lamented like, I could never meet an amazing woman such a Hannah. Well then, don't do things like that. Now I'm discussing with Bob about my baby's name. We're struggling to come up with a good name. And Bob is already smitten. He's so affectionate that he won't let my baby marry anyone. I couldn't show this grandchild to my parents, but I'm glad Bob is happy. Someday, when my baby learns to speak, I want to make Bob be called her grandpa. Despite appearances, he'll probably burst into tears. I'm looking forward to it.